They say it's just a parking ticket. $40. Barely more than a dinner. But that piece of paper on Nia Holloway's windshield wasn't just a fine. It was a message, a reminder, a slap in the face disguised as policy. Her car was parked exactly where the city guidelines allowed, meters visible, license plate clean, and yet the neon orange envelope fluttered like a warning flag under the wiper blade. Violation, it said. No explanation, no timestamp. Just a code and a barcode leading to a website that didn't offer answers, only a place to pay. Nia stared at it in disbelief. She was a civil rights attorney, a homeowner, a single mother who knew city codes better than most traffic officers. And yet, there it was, a $40 ticket for doing absolutely nothing wrong. At first, she laughed. Maybe it was an error. A new guy on patrol, a glitch. She logged into the city's online parking violation resolution portal, a term so sanitized it sounded like customer service, and found not one ticket, but 3, issued over the last 3 weeks, same block, same car, totaling $120, plus a $30 processing fee for repeat infractions. She had never received the first 2. They had gone straight to a collection system she never opted into. The fine had grown without her ever knowing it. She called the city parking office. The hold music was cheerful. The voice on the other end was not. "Ma'am, the system is automated," the clerk snapped. "If you'd like to contest it, you can appear in traffic court. Next availability is 6 weeks out." When Nia asked for a review of the camera footage, she was told, "We don't have body cam or street footage for non-moving violations." She requested to speak to a supervisor. The line went silent, then disconnected. It wasn't the money that bothered her. It was the assumption, the quiet accusation, that someone like her, black, female, behind the wheel of a well-maintained SUV, wasn't expected to know her rights, or worse, wouldn't care to fight back. It felt personal, deliberate, like being told, without saying it out loud, "You don't belong here. Pay and move along." This wasn't law enforcement. This was predation, and Nia felt it in her bones. As she sat at her kitchen table, staring at the notice again, something shifted. It wasn't about the $40 anymore. It was about control. Revenue collection masked as urban safety. Targeted fines hidden under the illusion of compliance. She knew this pattern. She'd seen it before, in landlord schemes, in wage theft, in quiet zoning violations that pushed out entire neighborhoods. But this time, it was parked right in her driveway. And if this was happening to her, with her degrees and credentials and courtroom experience, what was happening to the people without all that protection? Nia didn't know it yet, but that single $40 ticket was the tip of a multi-million-dollar iceberg, and she was about to expose all of it. Nia Holloway wasn't the kind of woman to let things go quietly. 2 days after the 3rd violation appeared in her city parking record, she printed every citation, highlighted timestamps, mapped her parking history, and walked into the Eastwood Municipal Office with a folder tucked under her arm and righteous fire in her voice. But what she walked into wasn't a city office. It was a wall. Indifference. Obstruction. A clerk named Dennis with a crooked badge and a smirk told her, "Ma'am, you're welcome to dispute the citations through the correct legal channels. We don't manually review cases." When she pointed out the inconsistencies, same officer code, same time every Thursday, same street, he shrugged. "Then maybe stop parking there." Back in her car, Nia exhaled slowly. She wasn't angry yet. She was calculating. That night, she opened a spreadsheet and began logging complaints posted on the city's digital forum. Hidden among pothole reports and sidewalk complaints were dozens of threads about parking violations. People reported cars being towed without notice, citations for abandoned vehicle on operable cars, and worst of all, vehicles booted while occupied. The common thread? A particular set of zip codes, working-class neighborhoods, areas historically black and brown. The farther she dug, the clearer the pattern became. The city's ticketing system wasn't just random. It was targeting. Using public records, she filed a Freedom of Information Act request for parking citations issued in the last 12 months. The city replied 2 weeks later with a redacted PDF and a note. Due to privacy considerations, license plate data and vehicle ownership have been removed. Nia wasn't surprised. She was a lawyer, after all. She knew exactly how much truth could be buried under red tape. But the file wasn't useless. The officer IDs were visible, and one code showed up far more than the rest, 0483JL. She asked around. Her friend Martha, a retired librarian, connected her with a young city employee named Tasha, who worked in records compliance. Over coffee at a quiet cafe, Tasha leaned in. 0483JL? That's Officer Jared Linton, real piece of work. He used to handle code enforcement. Now he does street patrol and parking enforcement in certain high-risk zones. Nia raised an eyebrow. High risk? For parking violations? Tasha nodded, bitter. They won't say it outright, but it's always in the same neighborhoods, always the same faces. The deeper Nia went, the more the city's system looked less like oversight and more like a business model. She discovered that the town had outsourced all parking enforcement to a private company, Hollow Point Municipal Services. It sounded official. It looked like a government department. But the LLC registration led to a shell corporation housed in a post office box in another state. The contract was authorized 2 years ago by a unanimous city council vote, rubber-stamped in under 10 minutes during a routine session. Nobody asked questions. Nobody raised objections. The documents were public, but no one had read them. The financial arrangement was genius in its quiet corruption. Every citation paid online funneled 60% directly to Hollow Point. The rest went into a local urban safety and infrastructure fund, a vague initiative with no budget report, no project logs, and no contact number. The payment processing fees, $2.99 per transaction, went to a separate vendor, which, Nia found, shared an IP address with Hollow Point's back-end server. Money flowed in loops, buried in bureaucracy and billing codes. She wasn't chasing a parking ticket anymore. She was standing at the edge of a racket disguised as regulation. And the scariest part? No one seemed to care. Nia drove to the south side of town, old streets with cracked sidewalks, fading paint on porches, and church marquees with broken letters. She visited an elderly couple, Mr. and Mrs. Leonard, whose car had been impounded for unpaid tickets. They lived on a fixed income. Their Buick hadn't moved in weeks, yet somehow accumulated 5 citations in a single month. Mr. Leonard shuffled to the front door with a walker, visibly embarrassed. We paid for that car outright. Didn't miss a single payment. But the fines stacked up so fast we couldn't even fight it. They towed it last Monday. Haven't seen it since. Down the street, Nia met a woman named Carla who worked nights as a nurse. Her car had been towed while she was asleep after a supposed overnight parking restriction violation. The city denied responsibility. When Carla finally located the impound lot, she was quoted $495 in fines, towing, and storage. They wouldn't accept payment in installments. I'm a nurse, Carla whispered, holding back tears. I take care of people, I save lives, and they treat me like I'm garbage for where I park. Every person Nia met had a version of the same story. But no one had enough time, money, or energy to fight it. And that's exactly what the system relied on. Fatigue, shame, silence. Back at home, Nia pulled public tax records. Hollow Point had received over $2.4 million in city disbursements over the last 18 months. Yet the name did not appear in any public service evaluations. No performance audits, no oversight committee. It existed like a ghost. Untouchable, untraceable, unaccountable. She dug further and found a connection that made her go still. Hollow Point's founding director, listed in the Articles of Incorporation, was a woman named Sandra Linton, the wife of Officer Jared Linton. That changed everything. It meant the very people issuing citations were profiting from the system. A closed loop of surveillance, enforcement, and profit built to look like bureaucracy, but functioning like a trap. Nia needed help, not from city officials or legal hotlines. She needed someone who had been chasing the same shadow. She found him through an old contact at a legal conference. His name was Rafi Cortez, an independent journalist with a sharp mind and a sharper tongue. He'd been run out of 2 counties for exposing financial irregularities involving traffic enforcement quotas. His last story, about a booting scheme in Louisiana, had led to 3 resignations and 1 accidental fire at a records building. Nia sent him a message. He replied with 2 words, "Let's meet." In a diner on the edge of Eastwood, Nia laid out her evidence: citations, impound records, ownership documents. Rafi listened quietly, jotting notes. When she finished, he leaned back. "This isn't just corruption," he said. "This is engineered poverty." He explained how municipal fines had become the new redlining, legal harassment wrapped in paperwork, designed to extract wealth from communities already stretched thin. "You're not just fighting tickets, you're fighting revenue streams." They made a plan. Rafi would use his press credentials to request internal audit data. Nia would file a class action pre-claim, requesting a formal freeze on collections until public inquiry could be conducted. She also drafted a complaint to the state attorney general, attaching proof of the familial connection between Officer Linton and Hollow Point's ownership. The next morning, Nia opened her laptop and froze. Her login credentials had been flagged: unauthorized attempts, system warnings. Her files were intact, but something had changed. She checked her mailbox and found an envelope. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 7 words. "You're poking places best left buried." It wasn't just intimidation, it was confirmation. She was on the right track. But they'd underestimated Nia Holloway, and they were about to find out what happened when the wrong woman got the right information. Nia Holloway didn't flinch. She read the words again. "You're poking places best left buried." They weren't handwritten. They were typed, clean, calculated. That was what scared her most. It wasn't some teenager spray-painting threats on her garage. This was someone with access, someone watching, someone who knew exactly what she was doing and wanted her to stop before the right questions reached the wrong rooms. But Nia had built her career dismantling exactly these kinds of veiled threats. She knew the law, she knew fear, and she knew when both were being used like weapons. She called Rafi first. He didn't sound surprised. "That means they know we're right," he said flatly. "Time to press harder." That same day, he sent her a packet of internal financial memos obtained through a confidential source. Someone inside city contracts who had been quietly tracking payments flagged as non-allocated operational overhead. The numbers were damning. Over $2 million paid to Hollow Point over the span of 18 months, with disbursements timed suspiciously close to quarterly parking enforcement surges. More disturbing was the fact that the payouts didn't go through the normal city council channels. They were routed via the Emergency Urban Response Committee, a department created after a violent protest 3 years earlier, a public relations tool to restore order through nonviolent policy shifts. In truth, it had become a slush fund, one where citations equaled cash flow. Nia built a timeline. March 12th. Ordinance revision quietly passed, lowering the appeal period for parking fines from 30 days to 7. April 5th. Officer Linton assigned free movement patrol privileges in 6 residential districts. May 18th. Hollow Point receives an expedited $150,000 payment listed as equipment reimbursement. No equipment was ever logged. No public report. The racket wasn't just operational, it was choreographed. But the real breaking point came when Nia met Jasmine Fields, a 23-year-old warehouse worker who had spent the last 2 months biking to work after her car was seized for unpaid violations. Jasmine was soft-spoken, shoulders hunched like someone who had learned to brace for bad news. She handed Nia a folder. Inside were the original violation notices and something else. A photo. A time-stamped image from Jasmine's apartment building security camera showing her car being towed at 2:41 a.m., though the citation claimed the offense occurred at 4:17 a.m. The ticket was written after the car was already gone. "That's fabricated evidence," Rafi said when Nia showed him. "They're writing tickets after the fact, to justify the tows. It's not enforcement, it's retroactive cover-up." They were now staring at something bigger than mismanagement. This was a falsification of legal records, civil rights abuse, asset forfeiture without due process. Nia escalated. She filed a formal complaint with the State Office of Inspector General, attaching a 48-page affidavit detailing the payment cycles, officer assignments, fabricated timestamps, and direct financial ties between Officer Linton and Hollow Point Municipal Services. She submitted anonymized testimonials from over 30 residents. Rafi backed it with an investigative report that traced Hollow Point's shell companies across 2 states, linking them to other municipalities with similar automated enforcement complaints. But not 48 hours later, Rafi's car was broken into. His laptop was stolen. No wallet, no stereo, just the hard drive with all his raw footage. When police arrived, they noted no signs of forced entry and closed the case in 24 hours. Meanwhile, Nia's cloud account was locked out. She filed a support ticket and received a reply that her backup folder had been flagged for irregular traffic and temporarily archived for review. She called the provider directly, only to be told the account had been formally deactivated due to a legal takedown notice. They weren't just watching, they were reaching. That night, Nia sat at her dining table, her laptop dim, her house dark except for a lamp in the corner. She pulled out a hard copy of her timeline, her notes, her evidence. One page caught her eye, the name Gregory Paulson, a local tow truck driver she'd spoken with briefly weeks ago. He had mentioned seeing the same red SUV getting pulled every 2 weeks from the same neighborhood, the same SUV Jasmine had driven. She called him. "Yeah, I remember," he said, voice tired. "That car didn't even have a violation. We were told to move it for street cleaning, but there weren't any signs posted." "Who told you?" Nia asked. There was a pause, then, "Dispatch came from a private line. Not city ops. I still have the logs. You want to see?" She met him the next morning at the towing yard. The place smelled of old rubber and resentment. Gregory handed her a printout of dispatch calls. Coded, yes, but still traceable. One number showed up repeatedly. Nia ran a reverse lookup. It wasn't from City Dispatch. It belonged to a private call center leased by Hollow Point, based in Nevada. Her hands tightened around the paper. They were operating their own shadow enforcement system, outsourcing violations, dispatching tows, and rewriting citations afterward to cover the trail. A private company acting with the appearance of legal authority, but none of the accountability. And then Gregory said something that shifted everything. "You might want to talk to my buddy Dean," he muttered. "He works nights. Said he saw Linton once, taking pictures of a car before it was ticketed, like setting it up. Dean said it felt wrong. Said the car belonged to some kid who just started at the post office. The next day, that same kid came back looking for his car. Said he never even got a warning." Nia's jaw clenched. It wasn't just a predatory cycle, it was a strategy. They weren't reacting to violations, they were manufacturing them. The next name she wrote down was Dean Mercer. And she was going to find him. Nia found Dean Mercer just after sundown in the back corner of a quiet Waffle House off Route 9, hunched over a greasy plate of eggs he hadn't touched. He looked exactly like a man who'd seen too much and talked too little. Ex-tow operator, denim jacket, sun-scarred hands, and eyes that flicked toward every noise behind him. When she introduced herself, he didn't shake her hand. Just stared at her for a long second and said, "You're the one digging into the ticket mess?" She nodded. He looked down at his plate. "I'll give you 5 minutes." Nia didn't waste any. She pulled out the dispatch logs from Gregory and laid them on the table. "This number here, did you ever get calls from it?" Dean didn't answer at first, then, Yeah, we all did. They called it fast track protocol. If that number rang, you picked up, didn't ask questions, didn't wait for paperwork. He pushed his plate away. Sometimes we were told to tow first, write later. Sometimes the citation never even came through. But they always knew exactly what car to target. Nia leaned in. And Officer Linton? Dean rubbed his eyes like someone trying to erase a memory. I saw him more than once, sitting in his cruiser, pointing out cars on a tablet. I asked him once what the deal was. He just laughed, said, "It's like fishing. You find where they cluster, you drop the net." Dean's voice dropped to a whisper. He called it a quota racket. Bragged that Hollow Point paid out bonuses when 2 numbers stayed up. She could feel her pulse ticking louder. "Do you have anything to prove that?" Dean pulled out a small flash drive from his pocket. "One night I left my dash cam running by accident, caught audio of him talking with another officer. I wasn't supposed to have it, but, well, I've been waiting for someone who gave a damn." Nia took the flash drive like it weighed 100 pounds. "You understand this could be critical evidence in a federal investigation." "I understand," Dean said. "I just want it to stop." Back at home, Nia opened the file. Grainy at first, but the audio was clear. 2 voices. One was Linton's, the other unfamiliar. "Linton, you hit District C this week?" Other, "Yeah, got 6, 3 with old plates, 2 expired tags, 1 was clean." Linton, "Doesn't matter. If the VIN's still in the manual list, tag it. We can always backfill the violation." Then laughter, then Linton, "These people never fight back. They pay, they beg, or they lose the car. Either way, we win." The silence after that line rang louder than the static. It was all there. Intent, abuse of power, coordinated falsification. Nia sat frozen. She'd spent her life in civil rights law, defending tenants, workers, students. But this wasn't just exploitation. This was a policy weaponized for profit. And now she had the voice behind the curtain. She contacted Rafi. They met that night in the same Waffle House booth. When she played the recording, he didn't blink. "This," he said, "is how racketeering charges begin." Together, they drafted a multi-layered legal complaint to the State Department of Justice and the U.S. Attorney's Office. Not just civil, but criminal. Racketeering, conspiracy, abuse of authority. Nia compiled a digital folder containing every piece of evidence: dashcam audio, dispatch logs, fraudulent timestamps, financial links between Hollow Point and law enforcement, and over 40 sworn testimonies from impacted residents. Rafi's investigative article was scheduled to be published within 72 hours. They had everything. Almost. That night, Nia heard tires on gravel. A car outside her house, engine idling just long enough to be noticed. No doorbell. No knock. Just presence. When she peered through the blinds, the headlights clicked off and the vehicle reversed into darkness. She didn't sleep. Instead, she backed up everything again, this time to 2 separate encrypted cloud accounts and a printed master file locked in her car trunk. But the next morning, the unexpected came from inside. She received a call from her bar association. An anonymous complaint had been filed claiming unauthorized practice involving the use of protected city data. Her credentials were under provisional review. She would not be allowed to file any new legal action until the claim was resolved. They were trying to disarm her. She paced her living room, furious. "They know the subpoenas are coming," she told Rafi on speakerphone. "They're cutting me off before I can deliver them." But Rafi wasn't discouraged. "Then we go public before they can. If the system won't protect you, let the story do it. Go loud." And Nia understood. This was no longer just a legal fight. It was a narrative war. She wrote a personal statement, not just as a lawyer, but as a citizen. She spoke of what the $40 ticket had led to, how silence had funded injustice, and how dignity had been traded for profit in plain sight. She ended with one line: "If the law won't stop them, then maybe the people will." Rafi's article dropped the next morning. It exploded. Local news picked it up first, then national blogs, then prime time. Hashtags bloomed. Hatch ticket to theft. Hollow Point Truth. Community groups flooded the city hall with calls. Victims started uploading their own footage. Tow truck drivers spoke out. An anonymous city employee leaked emails showing internal discussions about high-yield districts. And in the middle of it all, Nia stood steady, quiet, focused. But the most damning blow came 24 hours later. Dean Mercer texted her, "Check the lot." She drove across town to the Eastwood impound yard. The gates were open. Empty rows of vehicles. No employees in sight. But one red sedan, Jasmine's car, sat untouched, untagged, and unlocked. Taped to the window was a printout of a memo. It was addressed to Officer Jared Linton. Effective immediately, cease all tow requests not verified by municipal dispatch. Hollow Point authorization revoked. Internal review initiated. Nia stepped back and let out the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The dam hadn't broken yet, but the cracks were showing. And now the water was rising. The cracks weren't just showing, they were splintering. Within 48 hours of Rafi's article hitting national news, the city of Eastwood launched a public statement claiming concern over reported misconduct, but stopped short of admitting fault. Hollow Point's website vanished overnight. The domain is listed as under maintenance. Officer Linton was placed on administrative leave pending review, but no charges were filed. Not yet. That's when Nia knew the real game wasn't over. It was just changing shape. The city was going quiet because something louder was coming. That something had a name. Talia Brenner. She was a city clerk. Low profile, payroll and policy compliance. Nia had seen her once or twice at council meetings, always seated behind the stack of agenda folders, face half hidden by paper and indifference. But late one night, Nia received an anonymous email. No subject line, just a file attachment labeled Red Line Authority Chain PDF. It was a memo trail. Dozens of internal documents from Hollow Point contracts, city communications, email threads between legal advisors and enforcement heads. Talia had dumped the entire policy evolution that enabled the racket. One document in particular was marked Confidential, Revised Enforcement Guidance for High-Risk Recovery Zones. It outlined the expansion of ticketing scope based on neighborhood delinquency potential and revenue opportunity forecasting. Legalese, hiding something rotten. But the twist wasn't just in what the policy allowed. It was in who approved it. At the bottom of the contract was a signature, not Linton, not Hollow Point's CEO. Councilmember Edwin Morrow. A man who campaigned on financial reform and community equity. A man who held the deciding vote on privatizing city enforcement contracts. And a man whose brother, Nia discovered, was the registered agent for a shell company tied to the processing fees embedded in each parking fine. It wasn't just a greedy officer or a corrupt towing company. It was the city hall. Nia sat motionless at her desk, reading every line again. The money trail had always been clever. Spread across companies, jurisdictions, masked by vendor numbers and temporary tax IDs. But this was direct. Policy sold to profit. Authority used not for public safety, but for targeted asset extraction. It was state-sanctioned, line-item corruption. She called Rafi. "We're going to need federal eyes," she said. He agreed. They sent the files to a Department of Justice contact they'd both worked with years before, a woman named Elise Rand, now head of the DOJ's Urban Integrity Task Force. Elise responded within hours. "This is actionable," she wrote, "but I need a witness." And that's when everything turned. Talia Brenner agreed to testify. They met in a dim apartment off the edge of the city, curtains drawn, air still. Talia was scared. Rightfully so. She had printed copies of her resignation letter, burner phone logs, and screenshots. "I've been watching this for over a year," she said. "They said it was just revenue balancing, but I kept seeing the same addresses, same surnames. The software was flagging names that sounded non-white." Nia blinked. "The algorithm?" Talia nodded. "It was trained on citation data, which meant if enforcement was already biased, The system became even worse. Every fine reinforced the pattern. Every pattern turned into predictive targeting. They weren't just writing tickets. They were building a machine to decide who got them next. It was worse than profiling. It was automation of discrimination. Talia continued. They told us never to audit the highest performing zones, said it would interfere with operational momentum. But I couldn't ignore it anymore, especially after the payout started. Nia asked, "Payouts?" Talia hesitated, then handed her a separate document, quarterly disbursement summaries, each marked with a line, Council Discretionary Fund. Over $240,000 had been redirected from ticket revenue into this vague account. No oversight, no community record. That's where the money was going. Not to fix roads, not to fund schools, but to bankroll silent elections, backroom deals, and developer partnerships. The next day, Elise Rand issued a sealed DOJ order, freeze all Hollow Point operations, secure Eastwood's parking enforcement databases, and subpoena council member Edwin Morrow. The investigation was now federal. And the response was immediate. City Hall denied everything. Morrow issued a statement blaming rogue interpretations of civic policies. Hollow Point's parent company released a press release calling the accusations politically motivated. Officer Linton's lawyer scheduled a press conference to clarify misunderstandings. But the public wasn't buying it. Hashtags trended. Community meetings erupted. Other towns began examining their own contracts. Calls came in from Detroit, Baltimore, Fresno, residents who'd seen similar patterns. The story wasn't just local anymore, it was national. The parking ticket racket was being called a blue-collar looting scheme. That night, someone broke into Talia's apartment. They didn't take electronics. They took her printed memos. Only those. No police report was filed. But it was too late. The digital trail had been secured. DOJ servers had the backup. Rafi had already uploaded the redacted evidence to public transparency sites. Nia had delivered her signed affidavits to federal attorneys. But she still didn't feel safe. So she went looking for someone who could put a human face to the damage. That's when she remembered Jordan King, a 19-year-old kid she'd met during her early investigation. He'd worked 2 jobs to save up for a second-hand Toyota Corolla. He was ticketed 3 times outside his mom's apartment, fines he didn't even know about until the car was gone. When he went to the impound lot, the employee said it had already been transferred. But 2 weeks later, he saw his exact car, same dent in the bumper, being driven by someone else with dealership plates. He had screenshots, VIN numbers, a timeline. He agreed to testify. They brought Jordan in under federal protection. Elise recorded the deposition herself. He was steady, clear, angry, but not theatrical. "They didn't see me," he said. "They saw a number, a plate, a $sign. I'm not even mad about the car anymore. I'm mad that they made me feel like I never had a chance. Like no matter how hard I worked, they'd find a way to take something from me." That clip aired that evening. It broke everything open. Lawyers flooded in. Class action firms, civil rights watchdogs, investigative units. The Department of Transportation announced a full audit of automated citation practices nationwide. Councilmember Morrow resigned the next morning. Officer Linton was arrested that afternoon, booked without bail. Hollow Point's assets were seized by court order. Their CEO was subpoenaed to appear before a federal oversight committee, and Elise Rand was scheduled to testify in front of Congress within the month. Nia didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She watched the coverage from her kitchen table, legal pad open, pen in hand. She had one more motion to file. The headlines moved on faster than she expected. Within a few weeks, the national media pivoted to other stories, another scandal, another crisis. The DOJ hearings were still ongoing, but the noise had quieted. Councilmember Morrow faded into silence. Officer Linton's defense team stalled with procedural delays. Hollow Point filed for bankruptcy and tried to shift blame onto third-party vendors. But for Nia Holloway, the silence was not a pause. It was a signal. The work was just beginning. She didn't return to her old firm. She didn't renew her litigation calendar. Instead, she opened a small office above a laundromat near the city courthouse. Just 2 rooms and a front desk with no receptionist. She called it Civic Proof. A legal documentation center, free to the public. No appointments, no intake forms, no judgment. Just space, a scanner, a legal pad, and a woman who believed that truth should never be buried under bureaucracy. Every week, people came in with questions about parking tickets, evictions, fines they didn't understand. Most of them weren't looking for a lawyer. They were looking for someone who would just listen. And Nia did. She listened, took notes, and taught them how to write complaints, how to request public records, and how to file motions on their own. She didn't just fight the system. She helped people learn how to resist it properly. The red Toyota Corolla Jordan had lost. It was recovered during a federal seizure in Nevada under a fraudulent dealer license registered to one of Hollow Point's shell vendors. It was returned to him, keys and title in hand. When he picked it up, he sat in the driver's seat for 5 minutes, not saying a word, just holding the steering wheel like it was more than metal, like it was proof he hadn't imagined what they did to him. Talia Brenner entered the Federal Witness Protection Program, but not in the traditional sense. Elise Rand gave her a temporary DOJ fellowship. She now works behind the scenes, helping restructure enforcement guidelines in cities that rely on automated systems. Her fingerprints are already on 3 policy overhauls. Quiet work, but real. As for Rafi, he started a new podcast called The Small Ticket, a deep dive series into municipal corruption, civil asset forfeiture, and how everyday injustice adds up. The name came from Nia's very first email to him. Subject line, "It's just a small ticket, until it's not." Nia never expected applause. She didn't want it. But some mornings, she'd walk down the courthouse steps and hear someone whisper her name. Not loud, not public, just enough to let her know they were watching, that they knew, that someone still stood. And sometimes, she'd drive through the city, past the block where she got the first ticket, past the old Hollow Point office now boarded shut, past the impound lot that had become a municipal storage site for community vehicles, and she'd remember. Not the noise, not the headlines, but the feeling. That moment when you realize the system isn't broken. It's operating exactly as designed, and you're just not the one it was designed for. She'd think of the old couple who got their Buick back, of Carla, the nurse, who received a handwritten apology from the city and a refund check, of the young man who said, "They took my name off the system, but not my voice," and she'd smile, just slightly. Not out of pride, but because they didn't win. They didn't erase her. They didn't erase any of them. In the drawer beside her desk, Nia still keeps the original $40 ticket, framed under glass, not because it cost her anything, but it nearly cost them everything.